He having fun. But anyway, welcome to my series on boundaries. Okay. We're here to get started. I got my notes. Part one. I think we really need to talk about the difference between boundaries and rules. I think a lot of people get those two things misconstrued. They think, oh, you can't talk to someone you used to sleep with. That's my boundary. That's not a boundary, honey. That's a rule. Okay, we have to talk about the difference of that, and it's going to be a 3-part series because today we're going to talk about the differences between boundaries and rules. And then next week, we're going to talk about the feelings incorporated with that, because that's the reason why a lot of us don't even make the boundaries in the first place, right? Because the feelings that we have that are associated with making them, or even like making them in the first place, or even following through with them, right? Because of what we feel. And then the last part, we're going to talk about, maintaining them and dealing with pushback, because when you start making different choices in your life that you never made before, honey, okay, people are going to feel some type of way. Everyone's not going to be happy about it, especially if they're the ones benefiting from you having lack of boundaries. Okay, so part one, here we go. Now, like I was saying, there's a difference between boundaries and rules. A lot of us think that boundaries are rules, and they're not. So what is a rule? When you think about it from a perspective of a child, right? You tell a child what they can and cannot do. You cannot eat cookies before dinner. Take your shoes off at the door. Clean up after you finish playing. Do not run in the house, right? Those are rules, right? But a boundary is something that you will do if that rule is violated. Okay, so let's pretend we are warring. I'm on my side. This TV, this phone, or whatever is the boundary line, and you're on the other side. Now, what would a rule be regarding the line? The rule might be, do not cross the line, right? We beefing. Don't cross this line, right? But the boundary would be, what give me an example of what a boundary be? It's okay. You could talk to the screen. You could talk to the TV. You're not weird. We all talk to ourselves. It's normal. Okay. But I also want you to think about it and take a minute to think about it. Okay. The boundary would be, if you cross this line, I will use lethal force. I will do this thing, right? That is the boundary. It's something that you will do. It's not something what someone can or cannot do. That is a rule. The boundary is, if they violate this rule, which you have communicated, which we'll get into, because how can you have a rule that no one knows and then they violate it and they're like, you crossed my boundaries, woman. Did you let them know that that was a rule that you had, right? So example. So rules, take your shoes off at the door. Do not raise your voice at me, because a lot of people be getting yelled at out here. Do not cheat on me. If I lend you money, pay me the money back. Those are the rules. The boundary would be, if you do not take your shoes off at the door when you enter my house. It doesn't always have to be something that you're physically going to do. It could just be an ask, right? I will ask you to take off your shoes. And if you refuse to take off your shoes at my house, I will ask you to leave. If you're just dealing with somebody that's like, oh, and then you decided to let it go for whatever, the boundary could be, at this point, since you did not take your shoes off at the door, you are no longer invited over my house. I will not invite you over anymore, right? If you raise your voice at me, I will not continue the conversation, right? They breached the rule. They raised their voice. I will not continue the conversation. If you cheat on me, I will break up with you. I will not continue this relationship. It doesn't have to always be that extreme, because we see it all the time. People get cheated on all the time and they continue to have the relationship. It can literally just be, we will now go to counseling, right? We will do this thing, right? I don't know, whatever your boundary is, but you have to follow up with it, right? If I lend you money and you don't pay me back, I will not lend you money anymore. It don't matter what's happening in your life. I will not lend you money anymore. That is the boundary, right? So I have my notes here, so I just want to make sure that I'm staying on track. So yeah, it's so important. The most important thing about all of this, you can do all this all day. The follow through is what is important. And with it being the most important thing, it's because, like, we could talk all day, but if you do not follow it up with action, right? So if you raise your voice at me, I will not continue the conversation. You literally have to just stop talking. But sometimes if you're just like, you know what, if you keep yelling at me, I will remove myself from the situation. And you tell them that, because again, it's about how you communicate it. You have to let them know, hey, I do not like being yelled at. I do not like people yelling at me. So if you continue to yell at me, I will not continue the conversation. And if it gets to be too much, I will remove myself. If you just sit there and you don't remove yourself and they keep yelling, you just keep taking it and taking it and taking it, they're going to know that you're not a person of your word. And they will continue to just try to breach your boundaries because it's like you're not reinforcing it. You're not actually following through. And that's really why boundary is the most important part. And that's why we get a lot of people pleasers, because in their childhood and in some point in their life, it was not safe to have these rules or to reinforce these boundaries. It was not safe, right? Something will be taken away, whether it's your affection or whatever, or just, you had an abusive parent or an emotionally immature parent. So you couldn't have these things. So you learned that my needs are not important. Well, now you're grown now. You get to say, actually, my needs are important, because honestly, think about it. What are they going to do? They're going to beat you up? Oh, I want $20. Can I have $20? Oh no, I have boundaries now. So since I lent you $20 like the last 1,000 times, and I said that I need the money back, you haven't paid me back, I'm not gonna give you the money. What they gonna do? Beat you up? Now, we're not talking about being in an abusive relationship. We're literally talking about you having autonomy over your own choices, your money, your own life. And what are they gonna do? What, they're gonna be upset? And this gets into like the feelings part, which we're going to talk about in part 2, but I do want to touch on it a little bit here, where if they're upset, a lot of us, we want to rescue we want to really make ourselves comfortable by not making ourselves be uncomfortable with their emotions. What do I mean by that? So, oh, I know if I have this boundary, I say no, I do this thing, they are going to be upset. Well, we have to understand those are their emotions. It's them to handle. And it's not for us to be so uncomfortable with their emotions that we try to change the situation to make them feel better. That is not our responsibility. It's really not. And a lot of us take it on, and that's what really classifies as a people pleaser. Oh, they're going to be upset, so I can't do this thing because I don't want to be uncomfortable with them being upset. So I will like to try to save myself the uncomfortability and do this thing. But ultimately, in the back end, you're uncomfortable anyway because you didn't really want to do the thing. And now resentment and all these other things come into play. So, but anyway, like I said, that's part 2. And boundaries are not about keeping people out. It's not about, oh, no one could just ever. No, it's about having self-respect, and it's really an act of self-love, because you want to be able to continue a relationship with someone, right? If you know that, okay, if I make this boundary with this person, it's because I love them enough and myself enough that I want to continue the relationship, but not at the expense of me. Okay, so I want to give some examples of like healthy and unhealthy boundaries, and what a loose and too rigid boundary may look like in different categories, right? So, like physical touch, right? A too loose boundary is anyone could go up and touch my hair. Oh my God, your hair is so cute, girl. And I'm uncomfortable. I don't want you touching my hair because my hair is my crown and it very much holds energy. Please do not put your energy in my head. But because I am uncomfortable with saying that, and I don't want to make them feel some type of way, I just let them do it. That's an example of a too loose boundary. But a too rigid boundary is I don't let anyone touch me, right? I don't let anyone touch my hair, anyone do anything. So even though I really want it, I might want to get my hair done and I might actually trust this person, but my boundary is so rigid that no one can actually touch my hair ever. No one can actually touch me ever, even though that's what you're actually desiring. It's an example of a too rigid boundary. So a healthy boundary would just be, you would just say and communicate it and be like, hey, when I'm in this mood or am I feeling this way, I really do not want to be touched, right? And I think this goes into why we need to really protect children. Like, oh, give grandma a kiss. That little girl don't want to give grandma a kiss. You don't need to make him give grandma, grandpa, uncle, whatever, give him a kiss. Let that child have autonomy over its body. Hey, do you want to give so and so a hug, a high five, or whatever? And they say no. Let that be a no, because you wouldn't like it if I just came up to you as some random person like, give me a hug, and you're like, I don't know you. It's like, so what? I want to give you a hug. You don't have no body autonomy. And that's how sometimes we be treating our children. Like, so yeah, let that child they don't need to give whoever his her name is. They don't need to give that person a hug or a kiss or whatever that person asks for. Oh, you're hurting grandma's feelings. You don't want to give grandma a hug. at your big age. Okay, anyway, and I'm maybe not get into it, but I'm really big on like protecting children. So it's like, and it's the same thing. It starts in childhood, where we feel as though we don't have the autonomy or the voice to be able to say, I don't want to give you a hug. I can give you a high five instead. Or when I'm in this mood, I don't want to be touched. So please don't touch me. We don't feel like we can communicate that in childhood. And then now we're people pleasers and we can't say no and can't have, whatever. Like emotional boundaries, where you just meet anyone, you traumatized up on everyone, you tell everyone everything your business from A all the way down to Z. That's an example of a too loose boundary. But a too rigid boundary was you don't let anyone in. You don't let anyone get to know what's going on with you, how you're feeling. It's just like, no, there's a big thing. No, you can't get. That's an example of a too rigid boundary, right? But a healthy boundary is looking at the people who have shown up, who have, proven that they are trustworthy, and you letting them, whatever. Or when you're, how we make big memes and jokes about it around Thanksgiving, right? And everyone's talking about your personal information and oh, what, and you be like, and then you got the aunt clamp backs, right? The healthy boundary, the healthy communicative way in which you would enforce that or say your boundary is, I don't feel comfortable discussing that right now. I don't have a desire to discuss that. And then you just look at them. And it's okay. You know what I mean? You could do that. You don't have to. You could just look at people. Like, you just literally, you could just be looking at people. It's okay. That's what we got eyes for. You have to learn how to dwell in the awkwardness. But again, we're gonna talk about part two because, girl, I don't feel comfortable discussing that right now, or I don't have a desire to really discuss that right now. So, and then you move on, just like we're about to do here. Mental boundaries, letting anyone and everyone put any ideal in your head, and you not having any kind of mental toughness to be able to be like, no, I reject that, or be like, let me ponder on that a little bit more. But an example of a too rigid boundary is not hearing, giving space for any other ideal that is different than yours. And that's where we get that closed-mindedness. And this one relates to spirituality as well, letting anyone and everyone dump their religious or ideology, spiritual, whatever beliefs onto you, and you not having any kind of sense of, you just taking it on like, oh yeah, because they said this is the right thing. But an example of a too rigid one is not shutting down any kind of other religious or spiritual belief that someone might be communicating to you, and because it just doesn't, or because you just like, oh no, I'm just gonna shut it down, I'm gonna be closed minded, I can't hear it, no, it's wrong, da 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 da, instead of actually just listening and then pondering and then seeing where it might be similarities or differences and da 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 da. That's where we get a lot of this divide from, because we have a lot of people doing that. So, but an example of like a mental thing is saying, hey, you know what? I can see your viewpoint. Let me just get some time to really think this over to see if that's something that I want to believe or that aligns with me, right? Same thing with the spiritual one. I don't go to spiritual practices. I don't go here, right? Because that's not something that makes me comfortable or doesn't align with what I believe. But I could see where your viewpoint is. Like, you don't have to, like, people that make people go places, and again, it starts in childhood when they made you go to that certain place all the time. And I'm not going to sit here and make one specific religion demonized, right? But I grew up in Christianity. But when you make them just go 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 go, even though they do not want to go, they are not living a life, they are doing doing a lot of stuff on the weekend but showing up on Sunday. Just because they go understand it because you're making them does not make them any more religious or saved or whatever the terminology is that you want to call it. It's just anything. It's just breaching their boundaries and kind of making them hate it even more so, right? It's like, I know so many people right now, they're like, I do not eat this thing because my so and so made us eat it and they couldn't cook and that junk was disgusting, and now they don't eat it at all. So, but you want to do it in the other area. We have to think about what we're doing in certain areas and how it relates to other areas. And if we didn't like it in that area, why would we like it in a different area? Financial things, we already talked about it. Lending money, right? You could just say, it's not on my budget right now. I can't. Example of a too loose boundary is giving everybody that comes to you with money. But example of too rigid boundary is not giving anyone anything, even though you might want to support them, even though you might have the means to do so, right? So at the end of the day, let's recap and let's wrap this up. The difference between rules and a boundary. A rule is, do not talk to me that way, do not raise your voice, do not curse at me. The boundary is what you will do if they breach that. If you curse at me, I will not talk to you. If you curse at me, we will not continue this conversation in this capacity. Again, it's also about communication. You have to communicate your boundary, because how are people going to know if you have them or not? I had somebody say, "Oh, you knocked on my door. That's a boundary." Okay, first of all, that's not a boundary. If the rule was don't knock on my door, I didn't know that because I never knew. So the fact that I knocked on your door, the boundary would be, hey, I'm gonna let you know that I don't like my door to be knocked on, right? But if that was never communicated, no one would ever know. You have to communicate your boundaries, and remember that you have the power and you have the freedom, because who's going to stop you from creating these things? Again, it's not about keeping anyone out. It's about protecting yourself, and it's about having self-respect, and so that way you don't feel used and just sucked dry of what you got going on, because you do not have a sense of authority over your own life. That's really what it is. You are in power. um and honestly, this is the beginning of you finding your self-love, your self-worth, your self-respect. You are on a journey. You are not always going to do it perfectly. Do not beat yourself up when you have a boundary and then you don't reinforce it the first time. Try again. It's not always going to be comfortable, but stay tuned for part 2, because we're going to talk about how to deal with your feelings, and after have created and trying to maintain the boundary, and what that kind of looks like, and we're going to work through all of the things that come with it. So stay tuned for next week, and I will see you soon. Okay, bye.